welcome to this episode of the WaitingForNextYear.com podcast. I am your host, Scott Sargent, and with me this week is none other than CBS NFL draft analyst Dane Brugler. With the Super Bowl LI in the rear view, we can now fast forward and turn our attention strictly to the NFL draft. I thought having no one better to talk Cleveland Browns and the NFL draft than Dane. We discussed the quarterbacks. We discussed the first pick. We discussed what the Browns can do to hit things right. We also discussed what the Browns can do to get things way wrong.
Trade down for number one. I think that would be a real head scratcher. You have a chance to draft the best player in this draft, whether it's a pass rusher or a quarterback. You have a chance to potentially get a difference maker on your roster, and I just don't think you can trade away from that.
I cannot say I disagree, but before we get into the rest of the interview, I want to mention Patreon. WFNY has a Patreon page you may have heard of, patreon.com/WFNY, where you can join the 55 and counting supporters of WFNY who can help us do bigger and better things into 2017 and beyond. Again, Patreon, patreon.com/WFNY. New to the Patreon supporters is a discount code for a local t-shirt company that you may be aware of, fond of. Maybe you have a few of their things. You want to pick up some more? Patreon supporters now get 15% off. But you need to be a supporter if you want to partake in those goods. So get to Patreon, patreon.com/WFNY, and check it out for yourself. But without further ado, let's take it to Dane Brugler from CBS.com Sports. All right, as promised, fresh off his trip from Mobile, Alabama, and scouting of the Senior Bowl, CBS NFL draft analyst Dane Brugler. Sir, how are you?
I'm doing well, Scott. Appreciate having me on.
Oh no, I'm glad we can make it work. This is you're almost like an accountant in a way, where once the turn of the calendar hits, you guys you draft guys and women, I should say, are it's your busy time, so I appreciate you clearing the schedule to join us.
No, of course, and this is something that I focus on 365 days out of the year. So for me, this is more of an enjoyable time because now everyone else wants to talk draft. I want to talk draft in August. So now everyone or more people want to talk draft, and so it gets to be a little more fun time of the year for me. Not without a lot of work, but definitely a fun part of the process.
Well, be that as it may, given the way the Browns season went this year, we too were talking draft in August. So we're right there with you, given that this is essentially Cleveland's Christmas on an annual basis. But as I mentioned in the intro, from your trip to Mobile, how was the Senior Bowl this year, and what were, I guess, your big takeaways from an event that, I feel as an outsider, I'm not a huge, a hugely passionate draft guy, but I always feel like the Senior Bowl often gets overlooked compared to its, the combine brethren and things like that. But what were your, I guess, big takeaways this year, and I guess your feelings on the Senior Bowl in general, given what Phil is doing and getting all those kids together for one final game?
Yeah, it's a great event. Phil Savage, obviously the Browns' former general manager, a guy who's worked in the NFL for a long time. He's been the executive director of the Senior Bowl for the last 4 or 5 years and has done a tremendous job really growing the game and helping evaluators, scouts, media, fans, just really giving them more access, helping the players. And it's really the first kind of the kickoff to draft season for a lot of these teams. I think you're right. It does get overlooked because, the Super Bowl has yet to be played and, the focus is still on the season. But for 30 NFL teams, their season's over. And so, the draft process is getting going, and scouts and general managers and, the directors of player personnel and a lot of guys in the front office, they've been working on this draft class for a while. But the Senior Bowl really marks the first time that coaches get involved in the process. They're focused on the NFL team most of the year, obviously. So this is really their first chance to get a first impression of a lot of these seniors. And so, the Browns, aside from the Browns making everyone mad with their practice styles, it was a good week, and it's something that, I think we learned some things. A lot of these players did well for themselves. A few, I thought, cemented their status as first-round picks. Some even put their names up the board a little bit. They went from maybe a first-round pick to, maybe they should go top 20, that type of thing. So I think we learned a lot. I think O.J. Howard, the Alabama tight end, he entered the week as the top prospect, and he leaves the week as the top prospect. Just so much to like with him. I give him a lot of credit for going to Mobile and competing. A lot of top seniors decline the opportunity because they're worried about hurting their draft stock. O.J. Howard, in a strong tight end class, he's viewed as the top tight end. He went to Mobile and showed exactly what he needed to, and I think he did well for himself. Hassan Reddick, the linebacker from Temple, I listed him as my number 38 overall player on my initial top 50 board 2 weeks ago. And I received a lot of questions about him, who he was, what's his player all about. And I don't think that's the case anymore, because anyone that didn't know about him before, I think they certainly do now after watching the Senior Bowl and all the practices, what he did in Mobile. He was an edge rusher at Temple, but at 6'1.5", 237 pounds, he's going to need to transition to an off-ball linebacker role in the NFL. So I think he has the athleticism to do it, and he showed in Mobile that he has the foot quickness to drop and look great in coverage. He can obviously get after the quarterback as a blitzer. So I think he went from a second-round pick into a possible first-rounder after his week at the Senior Bowl.
What do you make? You touched on it a little bit, and obviously being up in Cleveland, we were half of us were reveling in it, and half of us were kind of shaming them, of course, as it always is with the Browns. But with the way that their practices were handled and the way that other teams seem to not like it too much, where do you kind of come out on the debate of the Browns not owing those other teams anything versus some sort of like protocol and mutual respect among coaching staffs at that juncture of the season?
I think either way, if I'm the Browns, my job isn't necessarily to help 31 teams. My job is to coach the best way I know how, and coach with a kind of a secondary motive of trying to figure out, okay, is this a player that we want to possibly draft and invest in? And so if I'm coaching one of these teams, that's my focus. My focus isn't helping 31 other teams. So from the Browns' perspective, they did what they wanted to do in order to evaluate these guys, and that they have no reason to be ashamed about that. There's no set of rules about how you need to practice. I think there is a little bit of an unwritten rule that you want to be able to showcase these guys, not only for 31 other teams, but just for the players' sake. You want to be able to give them a lot of exposure, to the other temes. So from the Browns' perspective, I don't blame them. Now, from 31 other teams, if I'm a scout, I'm understandably not happy about it, because it's a chance, or I'm not able to see these guys moving at full motion or full go during practice. And so I'm just wanting to see more, and I wanted to see more. I'm not up close with these coaches and figuring out exactly what they're telling these players on the field and the different things they're trying to teach and the coach. And so if I'm one of the 31 other teams, I think you have a problem with it. And if you're the Browns, you don't have a problem with it. And so I think there's no one right or wrong. It's just a matter of kind of perspective, and it'll be interesting to see moving forward if the way the Browns handled practice this year, if Phil Savage and the Senior Bowl, if they implement any type of rules about practice and how it needs to be run in the future. So it'll be interesting to track moving forward.
You mentioned the Bama tight end, one of the taking the plunge and going and cementing himself as an upper echelon prospect, come draft day. One of the obviously headline omissions or thanks but no thanks to the Senior Bowl was Deshaun Watson. Do you I'm assuming you understand why he didn't participate, but do you think that could have been a misstep on his part to not do so, given what the Bama tight end was able to do?
Well, there's no question it's a missed opportunity. I think Deshaun Watson would tell you it's a missed opportunity. But if he goes to the combine and does really well, and performs well at his personal workouts and pro days, then it doesn't matter. Now, if he goes to the combine and struggles a little bit, or he's not as sharp in the individual workouts, then all of a sudden he doesn't have the Senior Bowl to fall back on. So it's a gamble either way. He could he could have participated in the Senior Bowl, and maybe he struggled, or maybe he does well. So you can look at it both ways. If I was Deshaun's agent or his friend or his family, I don't know what I would have told him. I mean, because I could make a great case why he should go and compete, and then I can also make a case why he really doesn't need to. It's hard for a lot of quarterbacks. You're going into a setting you're getting brand new coaching. You're throwing to receivers you've never thrown to. There's just no chemistry there. And it's not like you have some practices to get ready. You're being evaluated during practice. Most NFL teams, their scouts and their personnel, they leave on Thursday before the game even starts. They only stay for the practice. That's what they evaluate. So you have to be sharp during practice. It's a tough part of the job interview. And so, with Deshaun Watson coming off a 15-game schedule, he just won a national championship. For him to turn around in a week and go to that type of setting, could it have helped him? Of course, absolutely. Especially when you factor in the Browns and the fact that they own the first and 12th picks in this draft, and Deshaun Watson is not guaranteed to be a top 20 pick this year. It could have helped him, but it's a calculated gamble and something that we'll never know for sure if he could have helped himself. But if he goes to the combine and performs well, does well during the personal workouts, it's all a moot point.
How much do you think the final drive of the championship game played a role in things now that, our lasting impression of him is the championship and not, a flop and that he would have to rectify at a game like the Senior Bowl?
It certainly doesn't hurt. And I think it's something that is really one of the driving forces. If I'm going to pound the table in the war room for Deshaun Watson, the first thing out of my mouth is his ability in clutch situations on final drives to lead his team down the field and just eke out a win. It's something that he's done numerous times in college, in different settings, on different stages. He's done it on the biggest of stages. So if you're Deshaun Watson, that's quite the feather to have in your cap. And if I'm an NFL scout and I really like Deshaun Watson and I'm trying to sell him to my general manager and to the rest of the room, that's one of the selling points, is that clutch ability. In late in games, the fourth quarter, Deshaun Watson's a notorious slow starter, but as the game picks up, so does he. The second half, fourth quarter, it's when he's at his best. So that's something that you could see it, year after year at Clemson. And I think it especially played true in the national title game and just kind of reinforced the fact that he's a clutch player. And that's something that is certainly a selling point for these NFL teams.
I know it's recency bias, but have you seen a player be discussed anywhere from going first overall to mid-50s the way that Watson has, just despite his success, despite everything that everyone was ranting about heading into this season? He was the, whatever the rhyme was going to be to draft Deshaun first overall. It was kind of like the suck for luck thing. And then
right.
he wins a national championship and kind of, ends on a high note. And then you still have some mocks now coming out this week, having him, being in the early to mid-second round.
Well, and it's tough because there's so many voices out there. Not all of them are qualified to be, talking about, projecting where these players are going to end up. A lot of college football fans, would be confused why Deshaun Watson is not being considered as the no-brainer number one overall pick. But they know Deshaun Watson, the college player. They're not looking at his transition to the NFL. And so, I think there's a lot of talk out there. But for a player like Deshaun Watson, you have to be able to win from the pocket, and that's the game in the NFL, and that's something that he still has to work on. His accuracy, his decision making. He tends to get spooked from the pocket and vacate early, use his legs. There are also some questions about just his durability. Can he hold up He's about 215 pounds, and he likes to use his legs, and so he's going to take some hits. Can he hold up for a full 16-game schedule? So plenty of questions about him. His intangibles are off the charts. He's a winner. I think he's a guy that's really going to endear himself to the coaching staffs in the NFL. So it won't be hard for Deshaun to sell himself. And so once the coaches start to get involved, it's really going to be interesting to see how teams view him, because it's not going to be a consensus. We might have one team that would consider Deshaun in the top 5, and then another team that has a second-round grade on him. So I think it's more than just kind of the outside looking in, trying to forecast where Watson's going to end up. There's a split among NFL teams about where he should go. And the quarterback position is it's a tough position to evaluate. There's so many different opinions. Certain scouts look for different traits. There's no one true predictor of success at the position in the NFL. So there's just a lot that goes into the equation. And Deshaun Watson has a lot going for him, but he also has several questions. What will he get better at in the NFL? What's his ceiling? That's something that there's going to be a lot of varied opinions on. And so it's going to be interesting. I'm eager to, I was able to catch up with a lot of scouts in Mobile, and I'm looking forward to doing so throughout this process to find out more what NFL teams are thinking when it comes to Watson.
So you mentioned potentially being a no-brainer number 1. Is Myles Garrett as much of a no-brainer as everyone's penning him to be at this stage?
Is he a once-in-a-generation type of prospect? No. I'm not going to put that type of hype on him. But does he project as a defensive playmaker who is a threat to collapse the pocket on each snap? Yes, I think he can be that type of player. So, you look at him and he has the speed, the get off, to capture the edge. He can get low, convert that speed to power. For a player who just turned 21 years old about a month ago, his ability to counter, to adjust his plan mid-rush based on what blockers are doing, just very impressive. He has an understanding of what he's doing out there. He's not just relying on his athletic gifts, which most guys at that age, that's what they're doing, because that's all they've had to do their entire life. They've always been bigger, faster, stronger, and so they haven't had to really focus on the technique of the position, and that's something that Garrett, I think, really shines at. He understands leverage. He understands how to use his hands. So I think we'll have a lot of people saying, well, he only had 8.5 sacks last year. How good is he really? Well, Joey Bosa had only 5 sacks his final season in Columbus, and I'd say he was okay as a rookie for the Chargers. And point being, that sack number can be very, very deceiving. On tape, when you watch him, Garrett constantly is receiving double and triple teams. Offenses, they're really game planning against him. They're chipping him, putting extra protections to his side of the field. And also have to factor in that he was hurt over the second half of the season, and he toughed it out. A lot of potential top picks might have shut it down, maybe sat out, but Garrett wanted to be out there. He knew it was his final year in College Station. He went out there and gave it everything he had. So to your original question, is he a no-brainer? As the number 1 player in this draft, yes. In my opinion, he is the number 1 player, and I've been saying that since last spring. Nothing has changed since then. Is he a no-brainer to go number 1 overall? It's a little bit different. As good of a player as he is, Garrett isn't going to make the type of impact as, say, a productive starting quarterback will. So if I'm the Browns, if they fall in love with one of these quarterback prospects, then that has to be the pick. But unless they're head over heels for that quarterback, then Garrett is the clear choice.
From what you've obtained in being in Mobile or talking to, individuals that you use and to trust and rely on, do you think that there's a chance the Browns could go with one of these quarterbacks, given the question marks that surround all of them?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Hugh Jackson is going to have a very prominent voice in whether or not they do draft a quarterback, and if they do, who and when. And Hugh hasn't really been involved in that process yet. They haven't even had a chance to talk to these prospects. Deshaun Watson and Trubisky and Kaiser, they haven't had a chance to sit down with them, really study them as an individual, and get a sense for who they are as people and as football players. So I think it's very, very possible they could fall in love with one of these quarterbacks. And, you know, the scouts, the front office, you know, the coaching staff, they know they need a quarterback. I don't think anyone's under the illusion that Cody Kessler might be the guy long term. I mean, at least I hope not. I mean, they know they need to find a quarterback. And so it's all hands on deck with these quarterbacks. And it'll be interesting. They have to decide if they truly love one of these guys, do they have to pull the trigger at one, or do you maybe play your hand a little bit and use that number 12 pick, trade up and back into the top 10, top 7, maybe go get your guy. It'll really be interesting to see how they play out this draft with those top 2 picks. It's unfortunate Philly won some of those final games down the stretch last year, and that pick went from 6 or 7 to 12. But it's still a luxury that they have, and so eager to see how they play with those assets.
What would they have to do to really mess this up, given that it's you know, again, we say it every year that it's the most important draft in the history, and all that rhetoric, you know. But now with Sashi and those guys coming out and saying, "Listen, last draft, this draft, the next draft are cornerstones for what we're trying to do here." You know, you could argue that this one is, you know, probably the most important given the draft capital they've been able to obtain. What would they have to do, whether it's player selection, whether it's position, whether it's trades, to leave those 3 days and have you know, scratching your head?
Well, you never say never when it comes to trades. You never know what kind of offer you'll receive. But if they trade down from number 1, I think that would be a real head scratcher. You have a chance to draft the best player in this draft, whether it's, you know, a pass rusher or a quarterback. You have a chance to potentially get a difference maker on your roster. And I just don't think you can trade away from that. It doesn't matter, you know, what kind of package of picks you're receiving in return. You already have 5 picks in the top 65. So that's 5 starters right there, including the number 1 overall pick, which if you're doing your homework and you're scouting correctly, that's going to be a Pro Bowler. You know, there will be multiple Pro Bowlers from this draft class. You just have to find them. And so with that number 1 overall pick, you have a chance to really make a dent in your needs list, find a guy that's going to help you turn this franchise around. So I think at number 1, if the pick is anyone except for Garrett, Trubisky, or Kaiser, I will be very surprised, and I think they'll be making a mistake. To me, Myles Garrett is the pick, should be the pick, but at the same time, I wouldn't be completely against them going quarterback. I do like both Trubisky and Kaiser. I do think that they will be productive NFL starters, and so I would not blame them at all if they decide to go that route. And, you know, not even, hey, we're not going to play around. We're not going to hope, or we're not going to trade back up into the top 10. We're not going to hope they fall to 12. We're going to go get our guy. And, you know, with San Francisco picking at 2, Chicago at 3, the Jets at 6, Buffalo at 10, not to mention any other team looking to trade up into the top 10. You just never know how these quarterbacks are going to play out. So if they decide that they need to take that quarterback at number 1, you know, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and, you know, not blame them, because it's hard to believe that this organization, with all the needs they've had at quarterback, they have only drafted 1 in the top 20 picks since 1999, and that was, of course, Tim Couch. And, you know, it's just to go this long of a stretch without drafting a quarterback that high is really perplexing. And so if they decided they need to do that, then, you know, I won't blame them at all. You know, I think they kind of screwed up the evaluation last year by not taking Carson Wentz at number 2, or at least not thinking enough of him to strongly consider him at that point. And hopefully they don't make the same mistake this year.
You mentioned Mitch, obviously being a Menor kid. You know, Cleveland fans should have a decent amount of background on him. With the reports coming out now that he is closer to 6'1" than his listed height of 6'3" at UNC, does that concern you at all?
Not really. I will not let it concern me until I know what it is for, you know, as a fact. Scouts, when they go to college campuses, they're not allowed to talk to these juniors and these underclassmen. They're not allowed to measure them. So, you know, any scout that's saying that he's 6'1", they're guessing. You know, they don't know that for a fact right now. At the combine, we'll be able to find out for sure. I think he'll come in at 6'2" and change, 6'2" and a quarter, something like that, which as long as your quarterback's 6'2", you're okay. I think you, of course, would love 6'4", 6'5", but as long as your quarterback's over 6'2", that's kind of the threshold that you're looking for. And I think Trubisky will meet that threshold. So a lot of talk right now. Until we know it as fact, I'm not going to let it concern me.
Outside of guys being outright removed for various reasons, whether it be mechanical or off-field or whatever, how much will draft boards fluctuate between now and June?
Well, for NFL teams, they don't have a draft board yet, so they're still in the process of gathering information. What a lot of NFL teams do is after the combine, they'll meet, and that's when they start to build the boards. If teams started building boards now, then it would change quite a bit between now and late April. But because they know that it will change quite a bit, they don't bother building their boards until after the combine. After the coaches get a chance to be a part of the process, after the scouts all get in the same room with the general manager and the different heads of personnel, and they have a chance to really flush out the board and find out who are the top 150 guys that they want to stack up there. So this is a strong draft. There's a lot of position. I look at pass rusher, corner, safety, running back, tight end, wide receiver. I throw offensive guard in there. Those, 7 positions right there? All 7 are very, very strong. And so you're going to have tiers of players that are going to be very closely rated. So I don't think it would be a shock at all to see these guys kind of fluctuate a little bit. We're not going to see any big changes. At this point, I don't think we'll see any big, huge surprises. But the combine's coming up here at the end of February, and there's always a few names that you start to hear some buzz on that are moving up quite a bit. But in terms of what the teams are doing, those don't build boards until after the combine, so it won't be that much fluctuation at this point.
Of those 7 positions you mentioned, I feel confident saying the Browns could use 6 of them. Just given the dearth of receivers they selected last year, I can't imagine them going that heavy again this time around. But with all those picks you mentioned in the top 65, is it reasonable to expect them to fill the majority of these holes with those first 5 or 6 picks?
Well, with 5 picks in the top 65, 1, 12, 33, 51, I believe, and then 65. That's 5 starters right there. At least that they should be 5 starters. At very worst, 4 starters. And so, you mentioned those positions, pass rusher. Let's just say it's Myles Garrett at number 1. Cornerback, you could look at number 12, Marshawn Lattimore from Ohio State, T. Tabor from Florida. Those are options. At pick 33, Tre'Davious White from LSU, a guy that the Browns had the chance to coach at the Senior Bowl. He could be an option there. So you could look at really each one of those picks and point out a talented corner that could be there. Same thing with safety. I think that's also possible. The big thing will be, let's say Myles Garrett is a number 1 pick. And let's just say, for hypothetical sake, they trade for Jimmy Garoppolo. And they have their quarterback, and that's not the direction they'll go at 12. That 12th pick will be very, very interesting because they could go in so many directions. Corner, safety, mentioned O.J. Howard earlier. I think he's a possibility. Tight end, obviously not number 1 on the needs list, but at that point, you're just trying to find guys that can impact your roster. Running back even. We'll see how the running back depth chart kind of plays itself out this offseason, but say a Dalvin Cook, Leonard Fournette, one of those guys is available at 12. You can't rule them out. I think in ideal world, Jamal Adams from LSU, Malik Hooker from Ohio State, one of those 2 safeties, I don't think they're getting out of the top 10. But if one of them would fall to 12, to me, that's a perfect scenario. You're getting your pass rusher at 1, a guy that's going to impact the pocket, and then you're getting a guy in the back end of the defense who can be a leader and a guy that's going to impact your defense on the other side. So in a perfect world, that's how the draft plays out. But like I said, there's so many different directions they can go with that 12th pick. It really will be interesting to see what they end up doing on draft weekend.
I know you got to run, so I'm going to switch gears really quick. With social media being so prevalent today, you, in my estimation, in my mind, outside of a few people that pop in, like Bleacher Report's Matt Miller and on down the line, are probably the most engaging draft analyst out there. What is it about Twitter that you seem to like so much, and why do you feel? Is it an obligation? Is it just something you enjoy in terms of responding to so many inquiries that you get throughout a given day?
I enjoy it. It's something that it's kind of like we're at one big bar just talking draft and discussing different things about these players and what teams should or shouldn't do, and it's a sounding board to kind of discuss these guys. And for me personally, I really enjoy Twitter because it's almost like a fact checker. It gives me, of course, obviously I have my mock drafts on CBS Sports and my rankings and my different articles where I break down all the players and my draft book. And so, there's plenty of other ways for me to get my opinion out there. But Twitter is, the ultimate way to, do, quick thinking thoughts and, share my opinion on these guys. And if I'm wrong, well, there's no hiding from it. It's on Twitter. 50,000 people more saw what I tweeted, and so if I'm wrong, then I have to own up to that. And that's the case with everybody. So I think it's a chance to go on record and really kind of keeps everyone accountable in terms of people that are in my business that scout for a living, on the media side. So I do enjoy Twitter from that respect as well. But then just interaction with fans, it's fun. I enjoy it. Just kind of, there often are times when I'm, talk to people on Twitter and they bring up an excellent point that maybe I hadn't even thought of, or they point something out about a player that maybe I didn't know, or there's always cases like that. So it's a fun exercise and something that I'm not sure what the landscape of my profession would look like without Twitter. It's something that Mel Kiper paved the way for a long time ago, but I think the evolution of social media and Twitter really took it to the next level and gave a lot more people a voice, and me included in that. So I think Twitter is somewhat partly responsible for the access that I have to a lot of fans and the discussions that we have.
Given that I follow predominantly Cleveland media and Browns fans, and then obviously yourself, my timeline when I see you engage is predominantly with Browns fans. Do you have other regions that you would say are your I don't want to say focal points, but that you seem to get the most feedback from in terms of team fan bases?
Well, it's definitely Cleveland and Dallas. I'm a lifelong Northeast Ohio guy. No matter where I go in the rest of my life, I always will be. Almost all of my family still in Northeast Ohio. Same thing with my wife. And, in a perfect world, we'll be able to get back to Northeast Ohio at some point. But right now we're in Dallas and enjoying it down here. And so I do a lot of things with the Cowboys. I have a big following with Cowboys fans. Do a lot of work over at the Star, their new facility. So Dallas and Cleveland definitely. But I do this on a national level. So I need to know. Same thing about with the Browns. I need to know just as much about the Titans, and same thing with the Redskins and the Seahawks and everyone else. So definitely keeps me on my toes, trying to keep track of all these teams. But definitely Cleveland and Dallas. If I had to identify my two markets that probably have the most interaction with.
So for any of our listeners who might have been living under a rock for the last few years and might not be following you already, where can they find your work and follow you on Twitter?
Follow me on Twitter at DP Brugler. Try to, interact with everyone as much as possible. So, please feel free to engage me on there. And then also on CBS Sports and NFLDraftScout.com. I'm the senior draft analyst there. Every spring I put out my NFL draft guide, which is really the thing I'm most proud of every year. It's PDF document breaking down the top 500 players with full scouting reports, measurables, all the information that you need to know. So if you don't know anything about a player and, the Browns draft him in the 7th round, you can go to my book, find where that player is, and know everything you need to know about him and how he transitions to the NFL. So I appreciate everyone's, their feedback on that. It's something that's really, it started as a small project and it's turned into something that I sell 5,000-6,000 copies every year. Got 4 NFL teams that request it every year. So it's really become my baby every year, that draft book. So looking forward to putting out another one this year.
That's awesome. And thank you again for your time. Wealth of information, and I'm glad we could finally link up here.
Yeah, I'm glad it worked out. Anytime, be happy to join you. My pleasure, Scott.
All right, thank you. Again, huge thank you to Dane for joining us over at WFNY. Make sure to check out his work over at CBS Sports, as well as his always thoughtful and very engaging work on Twitter at DP Brugler, Brugler. We will have in the show notes. But for those of you checking out just the audio version, thought I could spell that out for you. And again, check out WFNY's Patreon page, patreon.com/WFNY, and help us continue to do the good things we've been doing for 9 years now. We've turned 9 at the beginning of February, which is insane to think about in internet terms. But again, thank you again for listening, and stay tuned for the next WFNY podcast. I am your host, Scott Sargent. Take care, everybody. Shorter than the midget, y'all know I'ma raise the bar though, like Bridget. See there a star, go, don't blink, you might miss it.